All right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for November 23, 2009. First item on the agenda is the consideration of minutes for the regular meeting on October 28, 2009. Are there any changes to those minutes? If not, those minutes will stand approved as presented. And we'll move now on to new business. First item there is a variance request. It is application Z09060 by Mr. Joe Chrisman for B&L Automotive, requesting the following variances in a commercial highway zone, and this is for property located at 511 Southeast Broad Street. First, a 36-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Ash Street for a detached accessory structure, which would be a trailer to be used for storage. Second, a 10-foot variance of the minimum required 20-foot rear setback for a detached accessory structure, again, a trailer to be used for storage. Number three, a 10-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Southeast Broad Street for a detached accessory structure, which is a solid waste enclosure. And finally, a 17-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Ash Street for a detached accessory structure, a solid waste enclosure. And Mr. Blum, if you would review that application for us, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, and to the members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The property, as you noted, is at 511 Southeast Broad Street. It's located at the southeast corner of Broad and Ash. And I'll show you on the overhead right now. It's the existing building as it was in 2007 when the aerial photography was taken. Since then, the applicant has done a building addition of 1,450 square feet on the south side of the building. You call Ash Street is the street that leads back into Highland Avenue and Holloway High School, and of course, here it is on the southeast corner of Ash and Southeast Broad. The applicant has operated a tire store and automotive repair business there for a number of years, and is seeking several variances that I'll go over with you in detail. So just bear with me on this if you don't mind. The first two variances that the applicant has requested are for essentially a semi-trailer to be used as a permanent storage structure to the rear of his building. As you saw today on the ride around, he does have a semi-trailer that is located to the front of his building that is currently in violation of the setback requirements, and it's been there for several years in that position. So it's essentially a permanent structure as it is right now as far as the length of time that it's been there. Although according to the applicant, it's been on the subject property for approximately 13 years now. Back in 2006, the applicant was before the Board of Zoning Appeals for an 8-foot rear setback variance for the building addition that was built within the last couple of years, and he received that 8-foot rear setback variance for the building addition. And the reason for that building addition was to help provide additional square footage under roof to store his excess tire inventory. He does sell a number of used tires, and according to Mr. Chrisman, according to what he has told me, that the number of, or the amount of tires that he keeps in stock far exceeded what he had prior to that building addition, and it still exceeds the storage capacity that he has in his building right now. So what he is requesting is to be able to use a semi-trailer detached from his building as a storage structure on a permanent basis, and it would be to the rear of the existing building. And let me show you on the overhead again. It would be right along this area here, and I'll show you the site plan in just a moment. It would be a 53-foot long semi-trailer, and because of the size and shape of the lot, and because it is a corner lot and has two front setbacks, two front setback requirements. The only way that it can be placed on that lot is with setback variances because of the limited amount of space in the building envelope that's there right now. The applicant approached us about putting the semi-trailer back there, and we told him that we, as in the planning department, told him that there was no prohibition against using a semi-trailer in a commercial zoning district on a permanent basis like that. But if it was going to be a permanent structure, it had to meet all the requirements as if it was a typical brick and mortar permanent structure with regards to zoning requirements and setbacks and so forth. So thus the applicant has come to the Board of Zoning Appeals to seek variances on the front and the rear for that semi-trailer. And here is the site plan that he has submitted. This is the older portion of the building, and this is the building addition. The trailer, as I mentioned, would be 53 feet long and would be 6 feet off of the front property line along Ash Street. Thus, a 36-foot front setback variance would be required along Ash Street. And it would be no closer than 10 feet to the rear lot line, which is this lot line here along the east side of the property. And there is a 20-foot rear setback requirement in the CH zoning district. And so a 10-foot rear setback variance would be needed for the trailer as far as the in relation to the rear property line. The applicant has a number of outstanding violations with the codes department right now, and the judge at City Court has not made a ruling on his case before him, has stayed the case until January pending the outcome of this meeting, and then if approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals for his variance requests, then proceeding to the planning staff and or planning commission for site plan approval for the for whatever is approved, and knowing that would take several months to go through the process, the judge postponed Mr. Chrisman's hearing before him until January. The codes violations are specifically with regards to the outdoor tire storage, and to Mr. Chrisman's credit, a large portion of the tires that were being stored outside, especially since the building addition was constructed, have now been moved inside, and so there are not nearly as many tires being stored outside as there were in the past. However, there's still some outside, and so he is still in violation of property maintenance requirements. And in addition, the outdoor storage of tires is also must be done in a certain way to meet the minimum fire code, and he is in violation of that as well. And in your agenda materials, you'll see a joint letter from the planning, building and codes, and fire departments detailing those violations. And if you have any questions about any of the pending building and codes violations, Mr. Robert Holtz, Deputy Director of the Building and Codes Department, is here. And with regards to fire code violations, Assistant Fire Marshal Michael Bartlett is here as well if you have any questions for him. With regards to zoning violations on the property, the applicant has been notified that the existing trailer is in violation of the zoning ordinance and the outdoor tire storage. He had a site plan approved in 2006 that showed the building addition, and that building addition has been constructed, although not all of the site work has been constructed. So, and that building is being used currently without a C of O. The Building and Codes Department allowed him to begin using that building in October of 2008 with the expectation that the remainder of the work would be completed in pretty short order. Mr. Chrisman has expressed to the planning staff, though, that he cannot complete the site work on site until He has resolution to this issue right now because he has nowhere to remove the tires that are in the trailer that are currently in violation. So the codes issues are essentially pending the outcome of this item right here, of these items that are before you. Mr. Chrisman gives his reasons for needing the setback variance in his letter, and why he feels that he meets the burden and proof that are required by the zoning ordinance. He references some reasons such as the size and shape of the lot, being a double frontage lot with 2 front setbacks, and also the fact that the original building was constructed on that lot prior to the zoning laws of the City of Murfreesboro going into effect. The existing building was built in 1956 according to the Rutherford County Property Assessor's Office. When staff began examining the site plan that was submitted and the other violations, and along with Mr. Chrisman's request, we also noticed that the existing dumpster that's on site is partially in the right-of-way and in the required front setback, and also appears to be in violation of the front setback requirements. So we had a meeting with Mr. Chrisman and his engineer, and we told him that was something else that needed to be that variances were needed for, and thus the reason for the last 2 variance requests that Chairman Rogers read aloud. You'll notice on the site plan that you have in front of you that, now pointed out here on the overhead, that right here in front, Mr. Chrisman is proposing to relocate the existing dumpster, which is right here, as you can see, partially in the public right-of-way, much further back, adjacent to his building. And in order to be able to do that, because the building is essentially right on that 42-foot front setback line, he would need variances from the front setback requirement along both Ash and Broad. And so you notice that in the that both of those variances had been advertised for. So 2 variances for the trailer and 2 variances for the solid waste enclosure. One of the things that I wanted to mention to the board was that there were a number of comments that were sent out to the applicant's engineer and faxed to the applicant as well. Those comments the applicant has chosen not to address, and most of those comments are site plan related issues anyway, so that has very little bearing on the action today. We are fine proceeding with action on his variance requests, even though the comments have not been addressed. And we did want to clarify one of the comments. The first comment alludes to a required solid waste enclosure around the dumpster, as well as required landscape screening. We'd like to strike that comment from the list of comment, or the list of required revisions. The reason being, it's difficult to say whether or not that particular requirement, which was adopted in 2004, is applicable to the applicant's current situation. We feel that the existing dumpster itself needs to meet setbacks or be granted variances, one of the two, because it does not appear that it was ever legitimately approved as a part of a site plan. And ever since 1984, we've had the same setback requirements for detached accessory structures, including solid waste enclosures such as dumpsters. And we cannot find anything, even though we know that it's been there for a number of years, now that it's brought to our attention, we can't find anything that legitimized its location in the front setback. However, we are unsure if the solid waste screening and enclosure would apply in this instance. But what we would like to do is to recommend to the board that, as a condition of approval, not saying that it's required per our zoning ordinance, but if the board chooses to grant the variances on the solid waste enclosure, that any approval be conditioned upon meeting the enclosure and landscape screening requirements for the dumpster. But that would be at the board's discretion. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. Surveyor's certification must be provided that the trailer and the solid waste enclosure are no closer to the property lines than allowed by the board's action. Number two, the Planning Commission must grant site plan approval for the proposed development, or at the planning director's discretion, the planning staff may review the site plan administratively. Once the site plan is approved, the applicant will be required to pull any permits or modify any existing permits as required by the Building and Codes Director, because he still does have active permits with regards to his site work, and those permits with the Building and Codes Department may need to be not modified or repulled. Skirting to be approved by the planning director must be around the base of the trailer at all times. Number four, and this is an issue that the applicant and the planning and fire departments have discussed. There is an electric service line that runs directly over the proposed trailer location. According to the fire department, it must be relocated so that it does not conflict with the proposed trailer location and so that the site meets fire code. This is a matter of public safety. The proposed relocation plan has been reviewed by the assistant fire marshal and appears to be in good order. Staff recommends that any approval of the variances regarding the trailer be subject to final approval and inspection of the service line relocation by the fire marshal's office in order to ensure compliance with the fire code. And if you need any more information about that particular issue, Assistant Fire Marshal Michael Bartlett is here with regards to that. But the applicant has submitted a satisfactory plan for the relocation of that power line. And what I'd like to do now is just show you some photographs of the site. Excuse me, this is the front of the existing building. You'll see here is the building addition that was completed back in 2008. This is the rear of the site. And one of the other issues that I did not mention was that there was some additional gravel that was placed down to the rear of the site that expanded the gravel area. And of course, gravel is not an approved travel surface. And since then, the applicant has paved the rear of the building, as you saw today on the ride around, but that paving was done without any kind of site plan approval. This is the existing trailer and the tires that are adjacent to it. Now, that existing trailer would be removed if the applicant is approved for these variances for the trailer, and a new trailer would be brought in to be placed in the back of the site. This is the existing dumpster that is partially in the right-of-way. A closer view of the existing trailer. This kind of gives you a perspective looking down Ash Street, with the existing building and its relationship to the road. This is looking down the other way along Ash Street, and this is the gravel area that has now been paved. Here is the service line that would actually have to be relocated. so that the property is compliant with the International Fire Code. These are some of the tires at the south end of the site. This shows you a pretty good shot of where that trailer would go. It would be directly parallel to the back of the building, and there's a little bump out here at the back of the building where the trailer would be located. And there's a more recent view of the rear of the side. As you can tell, it's been blacktopped. And with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Of course, we do need to have a public hearing on this before taking action, and Mr. Joe Chrisman, the applicant, is here if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley?
Mr. Blomley, if we approve the variance in the side and the rear for the trailer,
The front and the rear.
front and the rear, are we approving a structure of some kind, or are we placing our blessing on the fact that it's a trailer?
It would be an 8.5 by 53 trailer.
So if it went to site plan and they wanted a more permanent type structure, or had other issues with it, would that be something they could require the applicant at that point, or is that within our?
I think that what the applicant is wanting to do with regards to the type of structure is not prohibited. So I don't think that the Planning Commission or the planning staff would be able to tell him that it would have to be a permanent structure.
Okay. I got you.
This type of structure for storage is prohibited in residential zoning districts, but not in commercial zoning districts.
Okay.
Mr. Blomley, under the current codes, or is Mr. Chrisman allowed to have the tires outside, or he is not?
I think I would be better off deferring that to Mr. Holtz and the Assistant Fire Marshal, Mr. Michael
Bartlett?
I'm having a brain problem here. Michael, what is your last name? Bartlett. I was fixing to say Barnett, but Mr. Holtz and Mr. Bartlett are here if you have any questions for them.
All right. Mr. Holtz, you want to go first?
Yeah, he's going to make me go first. Tire storage is permitted by the fire code to be outside. They are limited on pile size. Has to be a minimum of 50 foot from the building. They're limited on the height and the way the tires are stacked. But outdoor tire storage is permitted under certain conditions, if that understood your question correctly.
So you said there's no limit as to the number of tires that are
There is a limit, yes, sir.
There is?
There is.
Okay.
Per pile, I should say.
Okay.
You could put one pile in, separate about another 50 foot, put another one in. I think the lot's too big to get more. The lot's not big enough to have more than one pile, because it still has to be 50 foot from the building, so many feet from the property line, and so on like that. And it's a very small lot.
If it's not big enough for more than one pile, how many tires can be in one pile?
Yeah. It gives.
Yes, tire storage, I'm Michael Bartlett. Tire storage shall be restricted to individual piles not exceeding 5,000 square feet of continuous area. Piles shall not exceed 50,000 cubic feet in volume or 10 feet in height.
Okay.
That's a bunch of tires.
It'd be a partial volume
Okay.
pile, if you want to say that.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, before y'all leave, I would like to hear from each one of you, from your perspective, what violations currently exist on the property. Just bullet point for me the violations from a codes standpoint. We know that there's codes issues presently pending with the city court. Tell us just bullet point by bullet point, what are the existing code issues with this property?
My understanding from a property maintenance code aspect is the tire storage. And he has not completed that tire storage removal in a timely fashion. As far as his existing building permit goes for the addition, there are no current life safety issues in the addition. It's just a matter of fact that he has not gotten his C of O, mainly due to site work not being completed. Some work needs to be done to the canopy. There could be a few other items. I'm not 100% prepared to answer that question, but for the most part, from the Building Codes Department, those are his two major.
Okay, and the tire storage issue, he's out of compliance there because the tires are less than 50 feet from the building?
Yes, yes.
Anything else on the tire storage?
And they're not, from the pictures I saw, they're not stacked correctly. My understanding is you can't lay them flat. You have to lay them on edge. Michael might correct me on that. I'm not sure, but
Going good.
they have to be laid on edge.
Okay. And then the site work, he hasn't gotten a C of O because of some site work that left over from 2006.
Yes, that permit.
And site work includes, there's no paving, there was gravel, at least as of October 15th.
Yeah, I think the gravel was never on the site plan. Matthew might correct me on that.
Yeah, I can address that, Chairman Rogers. That rear area, there were actually no proposed or approved changes back in 2000 and approved plan in 2006. The permit was issued in 2007. The plan that was approved in 2006 showed additional paving on the south side of the front parking lot, additional paving on the north side of the front parking lot, the building addition, which has been completed, and landscaping along the perimeter of the site, the typical required perimeter landscaping. It also showed some islands out in the front of the site, and Mr. Chrisman has expressed that those islands are not practical. So I think regardless of the outcome today, he would like to submit a revised site plan for the removal of some of the islands that were shown on his 2006 approved site plan. Two of them were actually shown in front of overhead doors on his building. So just some drafting errors there with the 2006 site plan. So, of course, before getting the certificate of occupancy, a permit holder must pass all final inspections, and of course, at the very least at this time, the planning inspection would not pass because all of the site work has not been done, and the landscaping inspection by the Urban Environmental Department would not pass because the landscaping has not been installed. As far as the paving done to the rear of the building, I think that's definitely one way to bring the rear of that site in compliance, because the gravel area to the rear of the site was expanded. But at the same time, prior to doing that work, or prior to paving the rear of that site to come into compliance, that would needed to have been shown on an approved site plan, which at this point has not been done.
Okay, why is he, I got the landscaping part, paving part, then you said that there was also some other codes issues that he hasn't come into compliance with for the C of O, inspection issues?
That would be planning and urban environmental, the landscaping, and the planning does a site work inspection too. And
is there something that's lacking there?
There's some paving that hasn't been done at the front of the site, and some striping that hasn't been done.
Okay. Okay. Now, Mr. Bartlett, if you can go over from your perspective, from the fire safety issues, what violations exist there?
In the life safety codes on getting his C of O for the building, there's no violations that we have in the life safety area of that. The only request that we made was that he relocated the electrical lines so that they were not above the trailer when it was put in place. And we had requested that it have the wheels taken off, but he's going to have it covered underneath, and that's going to be adequate for that. We didn't want it to be able to be moved, but it's not going to be moved. But the relocation of the electrical lines was the only request that we had.
Mr. Bartlett, and I apologize for not getting your name right before. I know it, and That was a mistake on my part. But I think what Chairman Rogers is saying is with regards to the existing violations on site right now, with regards to the tire storage. I think what you're doing is addressing what would need to be done for the plan to be compliant. Is that correct, Chairman Rogers?
True.
Okay. With the existing problem, they're at least 50 feet. They're not at least 50 feet from the lot lines or from the building, and that is the one point that we could cite in our code book.
Okay. Okay, so we have presently, since 2006, we have a trailer that's in the setbacks. We have, none of the landscaping's been installed, only a part of the paving has been installed. A building permit, or excuse me, building addition has been in use for over a year without a certificate of occupancy. We have tire storage in violation of city ordinances and the fire code. We had gravel added to the rear of the site in violation of the zoning ordinance. We have a dumpster in the right-of-way. And we also have the same dumpster being in the setbacks and in violation of minimum screening requirements.
Now that's what I was referring to earlier, that we do not believe that requirement would be in play for the dumpster. The setbacks would be required, but that's something that the board could condition approval on, would be the screening. But as far as the 2004 zoning ordinance amendment that required screening, it appears that may not be applicable in this instance.
Okay, now before this application, was the applicant notified of all these violations?
For the codes violations, of course, he's been in court on, so he's aware of those. There was a joint letter, and this joint letter is in your application or in your agenda packages from Fire Marshal Honeycutt, Robert Holtz, and myself with regards to zoning, building and codes, and fire code violations. And that is the letter that is dated September 21st, 2009. And the dumpster violation, the setback violation for the dumpster is something that was just brought out in the staff comments. I don't believe that I had mentioned that in my previous correspondence with Mr. Chrisman.
Okay. How long have we been dealing with him for zoning violations?
My first notice is also included in the agenda materials. My first notice to him went out on May 7th, 2007. The building and codes notice went out on July 17th, 2007. Shortly after my notice went out and the building and codes department's notice went out, he did make application for his building permit. So we determined at that time to not take any action with regards to the zoning violations, allow him to work through the permit process and to come into compliance naturally as he built his addition and got those tires stored indoors and was able to remove the trailer off the property. But the building addition is substantially complete, and we still have zoning violations outstanding.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley or Mr. Bartlett or Mr. Holtz?
I have one follow-up. I'm going to make the assumption, Mr. Blomley, that someone could not request a variance with respects to the 50-foot distance between the building and the storage of the tires outside the building.
Since that is a fire code issue,
Right.
Of course, the Board of Zoning Appeals would not hear that, but if the I don't know if that's something that would be under the purview of the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and I'll let Mr. Holtz and Mr. Bartlett answer that question.
Yeah, they could go through the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals to apply for a adjustment to that 50-foot setback.
But that has not occurred. Is that a correct
It
statement?
has not occurred, no,
Okay.
sir.
And the storage of those tires we're talking about outside storage, right? If he builds a structure and put tires in it, that restriction doesn't apply.
Once he puts them in the trailer, they're
We're talking
no
about-
longer outdoor storage or indoor storage.
We're talking about outdoor storage as far as distance goes.
Yeah. Yes, you're correct.
And one of the notes that you see on the site plan, and this would, and you know, variance approvals are specific to the plan that's submitted, and you'll note that the very top of the site plan, there is a note on there as requested by staff, and this would become a part of the approved application if the board approved his variance requests. It says, no outdoor storage of tires is allowed, and all tires must be stored either inside building or inside trailer. And that's just reiterating reinforcing what the codes department has been attempting to do in the last few years.
Wasn't that the theory in 2006, is the whole emphasis, or the whole reason behind the application then was that all these tires were going to go indoors then, in 2006, but we still have a lot of tires outside, in a trailer, stacked outside, here and there.
That was my understanding, that the building addition was to remedy the problem of the outdoor tire storage. According to what the applicant has told me, is that the capacity inside of his existing building, the building addition, is not sufficient for the demands of his business.
And there was no plan in 2006 for the trailer to remain on the site, was there?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Guys, thank you very much. Mr. Chrisman, if you would come forward and state any comments that you might have.
I don't know where to start. I don't think I've agreed with much that's been said so far. But I think part of the thing I can explain, in other words, we've tried to operate this business while this construction was going on. I borrowed the money for this project in 2006. I paid 14 payments on the money before I was ever allowed to scratch the ground. Me and Mr. Bromley have been back and forth with each other. Huddleston Engineering has submitted 6 different site plans for me on this site. I feel like a man that's walking down the road and the guy stops to pick him up. He runs forward, gets beside the car, and they pull up 15 feet. And then you walk up there, and then he pulls up 15 feet. Every time I talk to this man, and we've had numerous confrontations, within a week I get a letter of something else he's found, just like the deal on the dumpster. The first word on that dumpster was 2 weeks ago. We've been doing this for 18 months. But what I was going to try to explain to you, we started out to get I was cited by the city for having tires stored in front of the building. We was going to build the building, and my intention was to get the tires out of the front of the building. All right? When we got the building finished and it passed codes, we went to the city. They allowed us to start moving the tires inside. So we moved all the tires inside that we could get in there. All right? The trailer that's on this property has been there for 16 years. We moved it around front because, as in the picture showed, it was in the back. So we moved it around front so the construction people could do the construction work. So we moved it around front. I never had the intention of not using this trailer. There's 2,000 tires in the trailer alone. All right? We can only do so much of the landscaping because it's like we've got to move everything from one side of the lot to blacktop over here. Then you got to move it from that side of the lot back over here to blacktop over there. Once we get finished with the site, then there's a whole lot we can do. But we're just moving stuff around till we get to that point. Then when we come in here and they talk about the trailer being around front, we just had it around there temporarily. We was going to move it back. The trailer that we're asking for the variance for, at no point on that trailer will it be as close to our side and rear lot lines as the building is. We came before y'all 6 years ago, and they give us like a 10-foot setback from the side, which the side of my building is 6 feet from the road. In other words, I didn't build near the road. They built the road near my building. The front road has come back about 20 feet since the building's been there. We're 20 feet off the back lot line, 10 feet off the side. That's where it's been forever. You know, we can do nothing about that. We're stuck with that building where it is. It's like they're talking, they present a thing, oh, you got to be 50 feet from your, if you go 50 feet from my building, you're not on my property. At no point on my property are you within 50 feet of the, can you get 50 feet? And I'm trying to work with them, but it's like, I just feel like I'm running up against a brick wall. Everything I suggest, we do site plan after site plan, and we submit it, and they find something new wrong. We've done everything we can do on this site to bring it up. In other words, I've got nowhere to put the tires. In other words, I can't blacktop where the trailer's sitting until I move the trailer. I can't move the trailer until I get a trailer to put the tires in. We said we'll buy we was going to get a new white trailer. We've redone the entire building. The entire site has been redone. It's in better shape than it was 31 years ago when I got it. But, I mean, there's just so much I can do with the piece of property and the land I've got. All I do is tires. Believe me, I don't want to be up here taking out your time. I want to be selling tires. But it just seems like I spend all my time arguing. I have argued with him 100 hours in the middle of the night in my sleep over this thing. And I'm so frustrated with it because I just simply can't meet the requirements that they're wanting without all these variances. And he sat right there last week and told me, if you come before the variance committee and they give you a variance, don't mean diddle. You still got to come back before the planning commission, and we may not accept it. So, I mean, this is the kind of frustration I've been through. It's not like, in other words, whatever you say don't make any difference because they can still overrule that. He don't always agree with y'all don't always agree with him. I go to the engineer that's probably built half the places in Murfreesboro, he draws up a plan that's supposed to work. Nothing works. Nothing is acceptable. And, I mean, I don't know what else to do. The dumpster, it's not my dumpster. I don't want to build a house for a dumpster that ain't mine. It's been there 20 years. The man across the street's got dumpsters sitting there next to the telephone pole, up against the telephone pole. That's city property. Mine's on my property. We try to put it where you can get to it with the trucks. We're talking about the landscaping out front. There was an old island. This was an old service station back in the 50s. The pumps have been gone since the 80s. The old island was sticking up, her pole sticking up. When Monty come down there, he says, we need to get that up. I said, I can't take the poles down with the island there. Somebody come off the road and run over the island. So we got a guy to come in there and dig up the island and just do the blacktop. Then he fussed about that. The stuff, I got letters from the city saying where they had built the building, they put all the trash behind the building, the rocks and the dirt and all the debris. Well, grass grows up there. It looks terrible. I get a letter. You need to clean this up. So I hire a guy to come in there with a bulldozer, clean out, scrape it all down. Got 5 loads of rock brought in, had it rolled down, pressed. Then I get a letter saying I have illegally replaced the gravel behind the building. The damn gravel behind that building has been there since Jesus was a baby. Grass had just grown through it. There was no grass back there. That's always been a commercial site. It was the old James Block Company. The only grass is there is what's grown up over 50 years. It was all gravel. But that's what I'm saying. Now, he says, well, the gravel is not an approved, whatever you call it. Surface. I had it blacktopped. Now I've illegally blacktopped over the gravel that wasn't approved to begin with. And I don't know what to do. I've done everything I know to try to get this site as best as I can. But, I just can't make a walking horse out of a pig. I've just got so much to work with, and this is it. And I want to do what's right. But I have brought him 3 site plans in the last month at $800 a pop. And all he'll do is look up and say, well, here's something else wrong. This deal on the dumpster. That's the first time I heard about that was 2 weeks ago. We've been dealing with this for 18 months. But my building is finished. We've argued over trees and bushes. If you look at the landscaping on this, one of the things they're fussing about, they want me to put trees between me and Advanced Auto Parts. There is 10 feet between the side of my building and Advanced property. There's a row of trees this far on their property. The trees are probably 6 or 8 feet into my property. I don't want to put trees next to trees beside me. I told them, I said, I'll put little bushes down there, little shrubs. It won't take up all my room, and it'll be easier to do it. Right across the street at the Discovery House, you've got Advanced Auto Parts, you've got a row of trees. The Discovery Center has nothing but little bushes. Everything I suggest, nothing works. And I'm so tired of arguing because I'm just going to put it to you straight like it is. I don't know what's wrong. If I'm doing something illegal, arrest my ass. If I ain't, leave me alone. I just want to run a tire shop. That's all I want to do. And this variance right here, like I said, if we set the trailer right where we want to put it, there's no point on this trailer that'll be as close as my building is. The corner of my building is 6 feet off of Broad. The back corner is 10 feet off of the back line. This trailer is further than that at any point on it. It's up like in a little corner. So it's like that, like kind of like y'all's desk thing there. This corner and that corner's close, but you can scoot that table up in there. It's not even as close as what it already is. But I mean, I don't know what else to do. I'm trying. Lord knows I'm trying. But there's just so much I can do with an existing building on an existing lot that sits catty-cornered on a corner lot that's almost triangle shaped. So.
Okay, well, Mr. Chrisman, I was here in 2006 when we granted this originally, and it didn't look good when we took it up in 2006.
The building next to me
I will say that it looks better.
The building
but we're
next
just
to me
not
is
there-
sitting 8
we're
feet
just
from
not-
the road.
I understand. We're just not there yet, and so we're trying to get there. We'll get this worked out one way or the other here. All right. Any questions for Mr. Chrisman?
But now, one of the things I wanted to say, they keep talking about making this a permanent structure. I don't want this trailer as a permanent structure. It's blacktop. It's on wheels. We want to back it in there. Now, I don't plan on, he says it's permanent because we use it all the time. It's like a grain bin for farmers. It's got corn in it all the time, but it's not the same corn. We take stuff in and out all the time. But, I mean, I don't want it like a building. It's a trailer. It's white. It's going to be up against the back of a white building. I just want to pull it in there. Me and 5 other people in Murfreesboro are going to know it's there. You can't see it on the road. But, I mean, I'm trying. But, Lord, I mean, this man's going to gray my hair for long, Okay. But I appreciate y'all listening to me and everything. If you have any other questions?
I have one. If the variance was granted with respects to the trailer being permanent or not permanent, but that's not my question, excuse me. Would it be fair to say that you would not have any need for outdoor storage of tires at that point?
Well, there shouldn't be. In other words, we've actually got enough room right now in the trailer and in the building to store the tires. But I didn't want to put the tires that's on the ground now in the trailer that's there now because we're going to move that trailer out. That's not even the trailer we want to use. See, that's one of the problems that I've had that I can't get Mr. Bromley to understand is that it's not that we don't want to do what's got to be done. It's just that we have to do it in certain steps. And you got to get to step 3 before you can do step 5. In other words, we've got to have a place to put all the stuff that's in the trailer now. In other words, if we had the trailer back there, we'd take all the stuff out of that trailer, put it in this trailer, and the rest of the tires on the ground will go in that trailer. Then we can pave down beside the building. Then we can do some of the landscaping. It can all be done, but it's just got to be done and everything I do, just like the blacktop. I thought this is going to tickle him to death. No, it didn't. He didn't want the gravel. He didn't want blacktop. I don't know what we want back there. But everything I do is wrong. I mean, all I'm doing is paying the bills, and I have absolutely no say-so in what's going down there. I've been down there 31 years, and I don't know a whole lot about a lot of things, but I know what I need to do and how I need to do that tire shop. And I just can't get people to let me do it and show you. If they let me finish up and then say, look, now what's wrong, then I could doctor it. But my problem is everything I do creates a new problem because of like I said, my building is 40 feet off of Broad Street, about 6 feet off of Ash at one corner, 8 feet on both sides. There's not a whole lot of room to do. And what little room I've got, they don't want me to use it. It's just like the tires. This is a smart man right here, but I want him to show me how you stack tires on the end. You can't do it. It's been like trying to stack quarters up on the end of it. That's what a tire is. They're saying you can't lay the tire flat. There's not a place in this country that don't lay tires flat. And when I talked to the fire instructor, I told him I could give him a bottle of matches, a box of matches, and a whole can of lighter fluid, and he couldn't set a tire on fire. Anybody that's ever burned a brush pile knows it's hard to burn a brush. They're worried like this trailer's going to spontaneously combust with these tires in there. It's not going to happen. If that trailer catches on fire, somebody poured a 5-gallon bucket of gas in there and set it on fire. They don't do like that. And they're worried like this thing's just going to spontaneously combust, and they're just not going to do it. But I understand they try to look at all the odds and stuff, but all I want to do is sell tires. I don't want to be up here bothering y'all, and I don't want to bother him. I know he's seen me far more times than I want to see him, but I don't know what else to do. I've tried. We've done everything that we know how to do to make it better. My building's in better shape than it was 50 years ago, and it still don't satisfy nobody. It's almost like I feel like I'm trapped. We tried to build on the building to get the stuff out of the front and make it look good from the road. And we opened up a can of worms because it's like once we started on the building, now we're worried about stuff that never would have come up. They never talked about the trailer. They never talked about the trees and bushes around it. I got bushes everywhere. I'm sweeping leaves off my parking lot every day. I don't have no trees. and I don't have enough room to plant them. One day we're arguing because we don't have enough parking spot. The next day they wanted me to dig up the blacktop I'd done poured, put trees beside a tree that's already there. You know, there's less room from this table to that right there than there is beside my building. There's a row of trees right there. They want me to dig up blacktop and put trees down through it. It's ridiculous. I mean, I know it's, you know, I know you're tired of hearing this too, and I won't take up everybody's time. I know they're ready to go home. But if you have any more questions or anything, I'll...
Okay.
right,
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward to the podium, state your name, your address, and any comments that you might have. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further comments or motions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just address something that Mr. Chrisman said. You know, we have you know, treated him like we treat everybody. We've been equitable and fair. That may not be the way that he sees it. I can appreciate that. He's a businessman. He wants to operate. But I can assure him and I can assure you that he's been treated no differently from my perspective than anybody else that walks through that door. Second of all, as you can see by the amount of time that's lapsed from the first time that I sent my first zoning violation letter, we've been very patient and we've been very willing to work with Mr. Chrisman on coming into compliance. As you notice, it's been 2.5 years since I sent my original violation letter. And the fact that we see changes that needs to be done to the site plan is no different from any other site plan that we review. We review it on its merits. And as I mentioned, some of the comments that I had for the site plan were more site plan related than they were variance related. But what I like to do is when I'm looking at a site plan for an item that comes before the Board of Zoning Appeals, I like to take a comprehensive approach so that if we can identify any potential site plan issues, that we can let the applicant and his engineer know about those issues before it gets to the site plan stage. Now, every site plan that, or for all work that's done in the city of Murfreesboro, for all on commercial sites such as this, before that site work is done, a site plan has to be approved either by the Planning Commission or administratively, depending on the scope of work that is to be done. And our zoning ordinance outlines what can and can't be approved administratively. I suspect this is something that could be approved administratively. And as I mentioned before, when asked whether or not, after the Board of Zoning Appeals reviews the variances, whether or not the Planning Commission could say, no, we don't like the trailer, we're going to require you to do a permanent addition. And I said, no, they can't do that. They don't have that within their purview. In that same way, the Planning Commission review is of a more technical nature. The Planning Commission is looking to see whether or not it meets technical requirements that are in our zoning ordinance, general standards, general practice of drainage, of paving, to making sure that it is technically compliant before it's approved and before work is allowed to continue. So while at court I did mention to the judge that it would have to go through site plan review, that's just the normal course of the development review process. And the planning staff or the Planning Commission, whichever is appropriate in this instance, would be looking at those technical issues. And that's the same that anybody else would have to go through. Sat down and had a meeting with Mr. Chrisman and his engineer, with another one of our planning staff, with our traffic engineer, and with Mr. Bartlett. And I'm so embarrassed for just having a momentary brain lapse before when I forgot his name, and I apologize to him again. But we discussed some of these issues at that meeting. Now, many times when we have a meeting with a developer and with his engineer, not everything comes up at that meeting. I mean, sometimes when we review it in more detail on our own, we think of things that we didn't think of at that meeting. Now, we want to be comprehensive in our approach. However, when we review a site plan and make comments, it's to help make the site plan better and more functional. And I have worked very hard to work with Mr. Chrisman during this process, and I can understand that he's frustrated, but I wanted to let the board know that from my perspective, I have tried to treat him fairly and equitably and do the best that I could.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blount. We had no doubt that was the case. So no worries there.
One thing I'm doing is, the main thing I'm saying is, if I had started with a bare lot and they said this is how it needs to be, I can do that. My problem is I'm not starting with that bare lot, and when we came before the board the first time when we was doing this, we told them this is an addition. We're not building a new building. And they told us there's different codes for a new structure than there is when you're trying to build onto an old structure.
Right.
And I just feel like that what they've done, or the way I'm being treated, is like I started out with an addition, under addition rules, and now they're trying to implement like it was a brand new building. And that's what I'm saying. It's just impossible to meet those standards with the existing property and building I have.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Comments, motions. We are dealing with 4 different requests. Mr. Baumann, I will ask, as it regards the dumpster is in the right of way. Is that right, or is it just in the setback?
Both.
Okay. How would we grant a variance of something that's actually in a right of way?
Oh, the proposed location is not in the right of way.
Okay.
On the site plan, you'll notice that if you look in front of the proposed paving near the intersection of Ash and Broad, it shows the existing dumpster location and in parentheses to be relocated. And as you can see, the corner of that, as it has been field located by Huddleston Steel, is jutting out into the public right-of-way. And then you'll notice back up directly adjacent to the building, he's got a relocated existing dumpster, and they've denoted a 38-foot minimum distance, 4-foot variance required. And now the amount of variance that was advertised may be reduced somewhat, because since we are not requiring an enclosure, then the amount of the distance or the amount of variance needed to the front property lines would be less.
It's still going to be in the very front of the building?
That's correct.
And is it not possible to put that dumpster in the back of the building?
I think there would be some accessibility issues. We explored with Mr. Chrisman and his engineer putting it on the south side of the building, which would be able to fit on the south side of the building without needing any variances. Mr. Chrisman said that does not work very well with his business operations, though, as far as
flow around the building.
Or I don't think necessarily the flow of the truck, but I think as far as the employees putting the tires in the dumpster.
150 feet down the road. Where it would be set would be right up against the building. It's set on concrete. It's where they can get access to it, and be right there when we put tires. See, we can't put tires. The city won't pick up our tires, and we can't carry them to the dump.
Okay. Hey, Mr. Chrisman, the public comment period is over, and have been pretty lenient on you here coming back, so we're not going to get in this in a continued debate here. Really, this is just a question and answer session for the board now. Okay.
I'll start comment-wise. I don't think there's any question, barring past history, that based upon the configuration of the lot and the needs of this business, that these variances may be warranted. My only thing is that is there a way to try to take care of some of the issues that we have before we grant these variances, or or are we getting the cart before the horse? Are we going to have to grant these variances in order for some of these issues to be remedied in the first place? It's like the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've spoken to Mr. Chrisman about bringing the site entirely into compliance. But his perspective is that in order for him to do this, and I don't, he might be able to address this better than I could, but I don't think that he has somewhere that he can dispose of the existing trailer and the existing tires, nor will his business allow. I mean, I think he needs that inventory as part of his. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but as part of his business. And so I think that his position is that he needs the variances before he can come into compliance. Now, of course, that's at the discretion of the board as to whether or not that should be the case.
I mean, that's the whole issue, is how many tires does he need on his property? He may have outgrown this property if he needs this many tires. Otherwise, if we put this trailer on there, we have probably more than maxed out his capacity for tires to be stored on this property. Okay.
Was the board in a similar situation when we voted on this addition? When I say we, I wasn't here, but I guess that's why I'm asking the chairman. I mean, was that not what the extra addition was supposed to be in 2006, and we're here 3 years later and still hasn't remedied that particular circumstance? I guess that's what's giving me some pause.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In 2006, there was tires all over the property outside, and the thought being he was going to build a permanent structure to bring all the tires inside. Well, apparently he's built the permanent structure and brought a lot of tires inside, but now he's added more tires to his capacity, and now they're stored out.
So he's mitigated the...
It's gotten better.
It's gotten better, but it still hasn't solved the issue, so we're still here trying to... And the question is, we put a trailer out there.
Are we going
to just...
In 3 years, we're going to have...
same discussion.
Yeah, trailer. Second-story trailer.
Is there any way to review or put a time limit on our approval of this structure, since it is going to be rolled in there, underpinned, or would it just be a matter of coming back and revoking the permit if, in fact, he doesn't remedy these situations with this additional? I guess maybe that's all hands on deck question, either Mr. Blomley or Mr. Ives or Chairman.
In our summary of code provisions that you have before you, it says the BZA may condition granting a variance on screening, landscaping, location, and one of the things is limiting the length of time of the variance, and on kind of correlating to that is, and I would defer this to Mr. Ives, perhaps giving a specific time limit as a condition to bring the property into compliance, and carrying forth the approved plan. And I'll defer that to Mr. Ives.
There is not a specific provision for putting a time limit on it, but there is the general statement of other conditions necessary to preserve the character of the area and to protect property in the vicinity of the variance. And I think restoring the character of the area as well as preserving it would be a valid consideration for the board. And I don't know, I can't make a suggestion of what a reasonable time limit should be. 24 hours would seem to be way too short, but there ought to be some period out there where it's feasible for the applicant to get the work done and then come into compliance.
And then if we condition, because I'm trying to think how, if we condition it on a time limit or some sort of time period, would the permit be just expire unless it had been applied for a renewal, or would that be a condition of approval? If not met, then would be back in front of the board for review? Does that make sense? How do we police it, I guess?
I think it's going to depend on how we would
word it.
determine to
How-
structure it today.
We could probably word it either way.
Assuming the board is of a mind to grant
Right.
any of the variances or all of the variances, it would have to think of the language a little bit, but we could, I think,
So we
place
could
on
say this is a
staff.
permit, it's, could we grant it for 6 months, for example, just to use something to knock around, and that means it's good for 6 months. If he wants it to extend, he could reapply, and then we'd be in a position to review whether it ought to be extended and made more permanent, or, I mean, is that an option to the board?
Well,
Might not be the option or best option, I'm just trying to...
I think that may bring us back to square one of the fact that that I think that it's his want to have this there as a place to store this volume of tires, and I think that if he was granted that variance, that the need would be there to be back in 6 months. So I think that it's of more value to get the work done in a certain amount of time as opposed to granting a maximum time limit on the amount of time the trailer can be there.
Then the remedy becomes one of an action to revoke the permit or revoke the variances if he hasn't complied with the conditions. It comes back to us that way, or comes back to...
It seems that perhaps a better approach to it would be that the variance or variances would be granted on condition that certain site plan, site issues, and we'd list those, be remedied within a certain period, and without suggesting it, we use the 6 month that's been mentioned. I don't know if that's the appropriate time limit or not, but assume that for a moment, that the variance would be granted conditioned on A, B, C, and D being accomplished within 6 months, and if it's not, it'd be up to staff to bring back to the board within about 6 months that those conditions have been satisfied, and so the variance is good, or they have not been satisfied, and the variance then would go away.
Would go away.
I think it'd be similar to when we some setback variances, encroachment issues that we require the a property line or a foundation placement to be field located by a surveyor. That's a condition. So if someone just went out and built it without getting that done, that really would void the variance. The variance would never have been issued, would be invalid.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Matthew?
Yes, sir.
What would, if we did what Mr. Dodd is not suggesting but outlining, what would be the action of the city if he was non-compliant with the site plan at the end of this time period?
I would think that our normal zoning enforcement procedures, would that be correct, Mr. Ives?
The normal, yes.
You get a violation letter.
There'd be violation notices and perhaps tickets to city court, or perhaps a suit for an injunction or for damages, or more likely for injunction in either Chancery or Circuit Court.
Mr. Chairman, how do you, your recollections of the 06 meeting and kind of the fact that we're back here again, obviously everybody wants to see this property, which has had improvements all the way cleaned up. I guess I'm just interested in recollections of that meeting and promises made, and if another opportunity is given, likelihood of getting this done, I guess, would be one of my, if any mechanism similar to what's been discussed would be something that would, what your thoughts would be on that?
Yeah. Well, from 2006, I just have a general sense of what the purpose of that application and granting it was, and that is that we're going to try to clean this site up. It was just, there were tires stacked everywhere, all outside, and he'd come forward with a pretty decent solution to build a permanent structure on the there that was going to allow some storage for all the tires that were outside to bring those inside, and to generally clean up that property, which to an extent has been done, but then we're now back in a boat where it looks like we've added capacity to store tires indoors, but we've now gradually increased our capacity on the site where we're back outdoors again. And I'm concerned that, like I said, 3 years from now we'll be adding a second story to a trailer that would be approved today, because he'd be back here asking for more capacity. But my position on this is he's made headway, and generally speaking, I think I'm satisfied with it. It's probably the pace of it has been a little slow for my taste, but I do like the idea of placing, if the application is approved, placing a timetable in which to do the work. And generally speaking, I'm probably okay with with adding the trailer if it will help him accommodate his business to get that done. But I for sure, if we're here in 3 years, would not be inclined to grant any more capacity space on this particular property. If he comes back again at that point, I'd say, all right, you've outgrown your property and you just need to find somewhere else. But can it accommodate the trailer? Probably.
And as Mr. Halliburton, I think, pointed out, it is an odd-shaped property. There's really no, anything on there has to go within a setback somewhere.
I would agree with Mr. Rogers in the fact that there is, if we could have had pictures 6 years ago and compare it to today, that I'm very familiar with this site, that it has been improved. Again, time frame may be in question, but I think that if we can structure it in a fashion where we can work with Mr. Chrisman and then also satisfy the site plan issues, that's the direction that I'd like for us to go.
Mr. Blomley, is satisfaction of those site plan conditions in your 4 conditions? Is that one of the staff recommendations?
Yes, one of the
Site plan approval, number 2, would encompass all the issues that site plan has?
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of the recommended revisions to the site plan that he chose not to carry out, and that's fine, that's his prerogative. A lot of those are site plan issues that we put out there just so that there are no surprises when it gets to site plan review. Now, some of those may not be worded the exact same way or maybe different from how they're worded here as our site plan review staff delves into looking at this. So the recommended condition number 2 in the staff comments would, in essence, take care of all of the site plan review issues.
You can get him a CO for what he's already built.
Well, once the work is complete.
Once all is completed.
That's correct. Now, whether or not to, if you're inclined to grant the variances for the dumpster, whether or not there is an enclosure and landscaping required around the dumpster, that would be in your hands as to whether or not you would want to make that a requirement as a condition of approval of these setback variances for the dumpster. But that is not something that is being required by the planning staff. As I mentioned, that comment is I'm, maybe, I don't know if striking is the right word, but striking that from my, withdrawing that, what, the lawyer's always there for you, right?
He's smooth. You got it. Very smooth. All right, let's go ahead and get a motion out there then on the first variance request, 36-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Ash Street for the trailer.
I'll move that we approve that one. Probably it's not the right time to say this, but I will say one thing about Mr. Blomley. He is a fair man that I've seen over the 3 years that I've been there. I might not have said that 3 years ago, but I've seen him be honest and fair with every person. So I just feel like I've got to clear that up. I'm sorry, but I do make a motion to approve the 36-foot variance.
Right? We have, any subject to staff comments?
Yes, subject to staff, all four of the comments. And in addition, the 6 months to complete the work.
I would second that motion.
All right, have a motion and a second. Are there any further comments or discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that application, that portion of the application has been granted. Move on now to the 10-foot variance of the minimum required 20-foot rear setback for the trailer.
I'll make a motion that we approve that variance subject to all staff comments and also 6 months time limit in order to get the site plan up to speed. Or completed, all things completed. Yeah.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that portion of the application has been granted. We'll move next to the 10-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Southeast Broad Street for the dumpster.
I'll make a motion to approve the 10-foot variance, subject to the staff comments, as well as the 6-month completion timetable.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that portion has been granted. And then finally, the 17-foot variance of the minimum required 42-foot front setback along Ash Street for the dumpster.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of the 17-foot variance along Ash Street, subject to staff comments and the additional requirement of 6 months to have all the site plan work completed.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that portion of the application has been granted. Mr. Crispin, the application in its entirety has been granted. I will say this, that the board, I think, has shown a lot of leniency here in the face of 8 zoning violations. You're presently before the city court on a zoning violation, and you also have a fire code violation. I think the board is impressed on you the importance of getting this work done in a timely fashion, and we do appreciate your efforts getting the property cleaned up. Have a little bit further to go, but look forward to getting that finalized in the next 6 months. So appreciate you coming in today. Thank you. Sure. Can you come to the podium so we can hear you better?
In other words, does that mean we can go ahead and move the trailer in and stuff?
You can move the trailer to its location located on the site plan.
Okay, that's what I mean now. Now, one of the things I was going to ask, if they look at this site, Ash Street's about a 12-foot wide road. There's a building on 3 foot on that side and 6 foot on this side. They've got to back the tractor trailer down in there. Our intentions is to get this, in other words, if I could take something and scoot the trailer up against the building, that would be my #1 priority. But it still has to be backed in off that road, down a hill beside the building. So they do understand that we're going to get this thing as within as close as we possibly can. What I don't want to do is be back up here and you say, well, you said it was going to be 14 foot 8 inches and it's 14 foot 6 inches. In other words, they do understand that this is not I can get it close, but it's still going to be hard to get down in there, and be within an inch of what we're saying on that site plan. It's easy to draw it. It's hard to back it.
If I could address some of these questions, Chairman Rogers. And one thing that I did want to correct for the record is that that trailer cannot be moved in until site plan approval is granted. So that could not be done today. Mr. Chrisman's next step would be to apply for site plan approval, at which time he would then need to, once site plan approval has been granted, then go to the Building and Codes Department and modify any existing permits that he might need to modify. And I would suggest that he speak with Robert Holtz from our Building and Codes Department outside in the rotunda to get some information on what he would need to do once this site plan is approved. As far as the positioning of the trailer, and that was one of the things that in my comment number one, or my condition number one, that the variances were approved to. A surveyor certification must be provided that the trailer and the solid waste enclosure are no closer to the property lines than allowed by the board's action. One thing that I would encourage Mr. Chrisman to do is to work with his engineer, Huddleston Steel. They can actually mark on the property the closest points that trailer can go. So that way, when you're bringing the trailer onto the property, you know exactly how close you can bring that trailer to Ash Street and to the rear property line. They've already built in some wiggle room with regards to that trailer. I think they've given you a few feet of wiggle room to the rear property line, Mr. Chrisman. So one question that Mr. Rives brought up that I think that we should have clarified, the 6-month time limit, if whether or not we, from what point that 6 months starts, whether or not that's from this date or another date, or from or just some clarification on when that 6 months starts running.
I mean, I think it's from this date.
From this date.
And the option would appear to be 6 months from the date of site plan approval. I would just point out,
You need to do that because you.
excuse me, given where we are today with the holidays coming up, if it's determined that this needs to go to Planning Commission, and I don't know if it would be or if this would be an administrative approval, but in any event, since he cannot start doing any work until the site plan has been approved, either administratively or by Planning Commission, there's always the possibility
You can't get asphalt after the 10th of December. This is what we've been backing up against this whole time. That's what I'm telling y'all. It's gone 2 years, but it's not like we're not trying. If I had that trailer sitting there tomorrow, within probably 4 weeks, I can have everything finished. But if they get it in there 3 weeks from now, we can't get blacktop till March, so we can't blacktop the front. We can't do the landscaping until we get the blacktop done. That's what we've been running into. That's why it's taking so long.
Still got 6 months.
Yeah, I'll be
How
on-
about some moving one trailer and drawing another one in and
Right.
throwing some blacktop down? I mean,
It
you
sounds
know.
good, but if you can't get blacktop, that's what I'm saying.
Sir, you can get it in March. I mean, that's 4 months from now. It doesn't take you 2 months to lay some blacktop.
I mean, it sounds good, but we ain't got that site approval yet, and he won't let me move the trailer until we get the site approval. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not on, definitely. Y'all go ahead and do what you got to do. We'll work with it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as far as we're concerned, the application's been approved. Sounds like you still have some steps you need to go through with the Planning Commission. And, all right, thank you. Appreciate you coming in. All right. We'll move to the next item on the agenda. It's under a height variance request. Application Z09064 by Ms. Allie Poocher of Foresight Group for ITT Corporation and the Federal Aviation Administration, requesting a 65-foot variance of the 35-foot maximum permitted building height in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. And this is in order to allow a 100-foot tall structure, a monopole tower and beacon, for property located at 1930 Memorial Boulevard, also known as our airport. Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Subject property, as you noted, is at 1930 Memorial Boulevard, also known as the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport. The Foresight Group, which is the design engineering firm, has Foresight Group and ITT, who is the contractor, have received a contract with the Federal Aviation Administration for the installation of a 100-foot tall tower on the property of the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport. And the purpose of this tower is for the installation of the ADS-B. And if you'd asked me what that stood for before the application, I would have never known. It's the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast System, for the infrastructure that the FAA is installing at many different airports across the country. And Mr. Gerke does a much better job of explaining how this technology works, but as you can see in the letter from the FAA that has been included in the agenda packages, this is purported to be the most efficient and effective new tool that the FAA is trying to have installed across the country for communications, air traffic control communications. And this tower will have a mechanism that will allow it to communicate with airplanes that are equipped with this particular system. And I'm sure I just completely butchered the how it's going to work, but Mr. Gerke can correct me on that. The tower itself will be 95 feet in height, but the FAA is allowing the city to essentially, quote-unquote, co-locate its existing beacon on top of the tower, which brings the tower height to 100 feet. And what I'll do right now is show you on the aerial photograph where this is proposed to be going. The main airport lobby and entranceway are here in this building. As you can see, Airport Road comes in off Memorial Boulevard, and there is a small parking lot to the north of the main airport building, and there's a 25 by 25 lease area, and that lease area would be maintained and equipped by ITT on behalf of the FAA, and there would be a lease agreement with the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport for the use of that property for the tower. And that tower would be considered accessory to the airport use itself. So while with, just to kind of explain the difference, with many cell towers, those are located on properties where they are not accessory to the principal use on the property. And I think there are very few instances where a cell tower would be accessory to the principal use on the property. So cell towers are required to get special use permits and height variances from the Board of Zoning Appeals in most all zoning districts. Whereas this tower would actually be accessory to the use of the property as the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport, because it would be providing a service for the airport as well as surrounding areas. One of the good things that is proposed to come out of this, one of the many good things, is that the existing airport beacon tower, which is approximately 60 to 62 feet in height, which is further to the south of the proposed tower location, will be allowed to be demolished with the construction of this tower. For one, the beacon will be allowed to be co-located, if you will, on top of this tower, and it will actually be at a taller height than the existing tower. But that tower will be demolished. Here is the site plan. As I mentioned, it's a 25 by 25 fenced area, be a chain link fence with barbed wire on top. The property is really, even though it's zoned residential single family, public facilities like the airport are allowed in single family residential zoning districts, and it's really not visible to any adjacent or directly visible to any adjacent residential properties. As you can see, that there will be some equipment around the base of the tower. Here's an elevation of the tower itself. As you can see, it'll be 100 feet tall, including the beacon. And this would be the ADS-B antenna that the FAA would have installed below the city's beacon, which would be at the very top of the tower. Because the property is zoned RS-15, there's a maximum height for structures of 35 feet in the RS-15 zoning district. So for a tower of 100 feet, a 65-foot variance would be required. In correspondence that the planning department's had with the city's airport manager, the tower will be compliant with the city's airport height zoning regulations, the airport overlay district, and that it is in the transitional surface zone, but it is actually below the transitional surface zone by 15.5 feet. So it will not have any effect on air traffic at the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport. With that being said, the Form 7460, which is the determination of no hazard from the FAA, is still in the process of being processed by the FAA and is due to be the applicant is due to hear back from the FAA by the end of the year. With that being said, if the board approves this request, staff recommends the following conditions. The Planning Commission must grant site plan approval for the proposed development, or at the planning director's discretion, the planning staff may approve the site plan administratively. And number 2, the applicant must provide proper documentation from the FAA to the city's airport manager and to the planning department once the FAA makes a determination on the 7460 application. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Ms. Boucher is here, as well as Mr. Chad Gerke, the city's airport manager. As you'll notice on your desks, I've laid a letter from Mr. Gerke with the position of the city's airport with regards to the new proposed tower.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baumann. I got her last name wrong then, didn't Pouchet?
Is it Pouchet?
I'm sure. I just got married. I'm getting used to it.
I'm sorry, I'm still not used to it.
Whatever you say,
I was thinking French pronunciation.
We'll go with that then. All right. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. Gerke, Ms. Boucher. I think it's. What do you call? How do you pronounce it? Poucher. Okay. Ms. Poucher, anything y'all would like to add?
Mr. Blomley summed it up. He didn't butcher all that explanation.
I have one question. If one of y'all could come to the podium, it's about the beacon.
That's my question.
I'll start and he may need to follow up.
Okay. I think the current beacon's at 35 feet in height, which is that right?
No, it's about 60 to 62.
Oh, I'm sorry, 60 to 60, which is probably still about treetop level. We're going up about another 30-plus feet, which will probably put it above treetop level. My only concern is we're not raking residential property around there with beacon light, are we?
I don't believe so. I think you can answer that one.
The beacon at its current elevation is adjustable, and that when we do our maintenance, we'll check it each year to make sure that that light is actually so many degrees above the horizon. And we would do the same even at its higher elevation to make sure it's not coming down low. But we want that light to be shown out and up for the pilots, so that we are always checking to make sure that's not coming across our residents and up into the air.
Are we talking about the rotating beacon?
Yes, the green
one?
and white light that you see at night, yes.
So it goes from the big, gigantic-looking thing to the small beacon? Is that what we're...
I'm sorry.
We're just switching poles.
We're just switching poles. It'll still
okay.
be the same. The current beacon, the current rotating beacon, is something that we purchased many years ago, and it was built quite well back then, and is still in great shape. So in a process of trying to save some money, this was something that we were looking to replace in a few years from now when we do a renovation to our runway light system. This afforded us an opportunity where the city and the airport does not have to purchase a pole. So we're taking advantage of this situation, and ITT was able to look and study it with their engineers to make sure that there was no interference with the radio signal, the signals from the GPS or from the aircraft. This beacon will essentially not be a problem with their main purpose with this pole. So it's just placing that light from one pole to the other.
Hey, Chad, did the Airport Authority Board pass on the location of this tower? It seems like an odd location. It's almost like dead center in front of the building.
We had to look for a location for ITT and the FAA where we're not going to build for 30 years. And where the current location of the beacon is a place that we are showing on our airport layout plan that there might be construction. And with that possibility, we didn't feel secure in keeping it in that location. The location that we picked out did not show anything but a parking expansion of the parking area that you saw by hangars 2 and 3 may be expanded in the future. And we took a look in the Airport Commission, and I just recently met up with the state engineer and their staff to look at this location, and it will fit fine with the parking lot expansion. And future, we'll also be moving the runway and taxiway regulators that are currently in the terminal building out to this location. So that one area will kind of be our beacon and our runway and taxiway light regulator area, and that all fits in with the FAA and ITT's plan and our airport layout plan.
And one thing that I failed to mention during my presentation was that we did ask the applicants to provide distances to the nearest property lines and distances to the nearest manned structures. And the tower itself is 100 feet, and all of the distances to the property lines and to the nearest buildings where there are actually people were greater than 100 feet. In other words, the maximum fall radius would be 100 feet, and it would be outside of any of those areas. Mr. Gerke referenced some equipment shelters that are proposed to be built in the future at some point, but it's my understanding that those are not manned per se structures. It would be more to house the equipment that he referenced. Is that correct, Mr. Gerke?
That's correct. The regulators for the taxiway and runway.
And one thing I also point out, how dedicated our airport manager is that, and I'd like to ask him a question to follow up too, is that I learned after meeting with him that he actually climbed the existing beacon to do maintenance on it. I was curious with the new 100-foot tower if he'd be climbing that.
I was young and single at the time. But no more climbing for me.
Understand that.
Mr. Gerke, I just want to, what I was trying to get at before, and I guess maybe it wasn't clear, this is the rotating beacon you're replacing.
Yes.
Is that same technology, that same light going on top of this, or it's much more condensed and different?
It is the same structure that you see minus the platform around it. I believe you have a picture of the existing two-pole wooden structure.
Right.
It's just the
But it'll be same light.
It's the 36-inch round. It looks like a big barrel up there.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the drawing looked like a much smaller version of that, and I was trying to see if there was some new rotating beacon technology of which I hadn't become aware.
It's pretty much a light to light.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Dodd, put the photograph up if the audience or any of the other board members would like to see it.
All right, then at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
Chairman Rogers, I'll make a motion that we approve the height variance subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that application has been granted. Ms. Poucher, Mr. Gerke, appreciate you all coming in today. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is under special use permit requests. Application Z09065 by Mr. Mike Jones for North Boulevard Church of Christ Men's Ministry, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment, which would be Christmas tree sales, in a commercial highway zone. And this is for property located at 1266 Northwest Broad Street. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. My technology set up here. Proposed location is at the Kmart Shopping Center, the 1200 block of Northwest Broad Street. This is the second year that Mr. Mike Jones has made application. His predecessor, Mr. Neely, made application the first several times this went before the Board of Zoning Appeals. The applicant is proposing to sell Christmas trees within the time allotted by the zoning ordinance. And this is actually the, as I mentioned, I believe the fourth year in a row that this application has been before the Board of Zoning Appeals. We have not received any complaints regarding this site in the past. The site has passed both its codes, preliminary codes, and zoning inspections, and the cleanup for this site has always been done in a very timely manner in the past. According to the information submitted by the applicant, the use will run from November 26th until no later than December 20th, and the applicant has indicated that his hours of operation will be from 1 p.m. until 9 p.m. Sunday through Friday, 10 to 9 on Saturdays. Parking will be located in the Kmart parking lot to the south of the display area. And what I'd like to do now is show you on an aerial photograph. So here's the Cornerstone Federal Credit Union. Here's the area where they set the Christmas trees, and they also have a little 8x8 portable building that they bring in for the members of the church men's ministry that work the event or the sales event. And parking is available here for all the patrons and volunteers. As I mentioned, the Christmas trees will be out in the open in the grassy area behind the 42-foot minimum front setback line. And you'll notice one thing that's different on the recommended list of recommended conditions from staff is with regards to the temporary structure requirement. After our last meeting, when we were hearing the application by the Boy Scouts for Fellowship United Methodist Church, there was some discussion about whether or not a tent permit would be required. And so after that meeting, I did some research. We looked in the code, the building codes director and myself, and he determined that according to the code, tent permits are not required if the structure itself is not greater than 120 square feet. So worked with Mr. Ongst, Fellowship United Methodist Church, let him know that requirement was not applicable to what he wanted to do, and also let Mr. Jones know that this proposed 8x8 portable building that they use every year does not require a temporary structure permit as well. If approved, staff recommends the following condition. The site must pass an electrical safety inspection prior to opening for business. An electrical permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection. With that being said, the application does appear to be in good order, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Jones is here if you have any questions for him.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? Mr. Jones, anything you'd like to add to this application? All right. Then at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the application with the conditions that's set by the staff being met.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Jones, that application has been granted. Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience today, too. All right, moving on to application Z09066 by Reverend Marty Blakely for Third Baptist Church, requesting a special use permit in order to use property in a residential single-family RS8 zone. This is for property located at 1204 and 1208 Allen Avenue as a children's playground accessory to the existing institutional group assembly use, which would be a church, located at 410 West McKnight Drive. And Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property, as you noted, are at 1204 and 1208 Allen Avenue, two lots that Third Baptist Church purchased, I believe, in 2007 or thereabouts. In the interim, they have placed some playground equipment on these lots because the existing playground on site was displaced by construction project that they had going on in 2007. And I'll show you the aerial photograph right now. The two lots are these two lots, which sit in the center of the block between Farrer and West McKnight. And the two lots, the two houses that previously existed on these two houses or on these two lots have been removed. And as I mentioned, playground equipment has been placed on the rear of those lots. And you can see in this aerial photograph that construction was occurring when this aerial photograph was taken in 2007. And I can't recall exactly where their playground was beforehand, but because of that construction, as I mentioned, their playground was displaced. They brought in the playground equipment on those two lots that they purchased, not aware of the fact that in order to use those two lots that were zoned for single-family purposes in a manner that's accessory to their existing institutional group assembly use, that they would have to have a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals because those properties are zoned RS8, and accessory uses for places of worship are not allowed by right in the RS8 zoning district. They're allowed by special use permit. Upon notification from the Planning Department, Reverend Blakely quickly made provisions to begin the application process to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And we have a site plan that I would like to show you, and a revised site plan at that. But what I'd like to do first is show you some photographs of the property. This is looking north on Allen, the front of the site. There are two existing driveways that are covered with leaves in these photographs. And it wouldn't be a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting without the escort. There it is right there. That's actually pulled in the southernmost driveway of 1204. And you can see where the houses have been removed, and there's a bit of rubble and debris left over from the house at 1204. I'm speaking off the cuff, but I would imagine that there are still some codes issues that they have to work through in getting those lots cleaned up.
Hauling that escort off would be one of them, wouldn't it?
Well, some might consider it a junk vehicle.
Did it coast all the way from City Hall?
I know I pushed it, but here's another shot looking straight into the property. As you can see, the church parking lot is directly to the rear of these two lots, and there's the main church building right there. Access to these lots would be pedestrian access only from the main church parking lot. There are a number of existing mature trees on the property, and these mature trees would stay as a part of this. There's really no earthwork that is proposed, no paving, no moving of dirt proposed with this application. So all parking would be occurring on the church's main lot to the rear of these two lots. This is the house directly to the north. It does abut single-family homes both to the north and to the south. This is looking across the street. The house directly across the street. And I think there are still some efforts that need to be made to clean up some of the debris from those houses, but Reverend Blakely can address the timetable for that. This is taken from the lot itself, looking back towards the parking lot with the playground equipment in the foreground. It's the pedestrian access here that leads back to the parking lot. Just some shots of playground equipment. I guess if you've seen one slide, you've seen them all, so I'll spare you the rest of them. As I mentioned, the manner in which this property would be used would be for children's playground area. And the primary times that the playground would be used would be from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. On Tuesdays and Thursdays during a Mother's Day Out program, and Wednesdays from 6 p.m. until 7 p.m., and Sundays from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. And according to the applicant, approximately 10 to 20 supervised children will use the playground facilities during these times. The applicant has submitted a site plan, which I'll go over with you right now. And the most recent site plan I've laid out in front of you, the applicant addressed all the comments that were in the staff comments. He's done a tree survey to locate all of the existing trees. And one of the things that I kind of used a logic that we used when we approved an accessory use on a piece of property adjacent to St. Rose, that it was more, in the middle of the neighborhood, it was more important to leave the existing trees and to keep the existing character of the neighborhood as opposed to doing regimented plantings that our landscape ordinance requires. So it's staff's opinion that it's more important to preserve the existing trees on site than to really have the plantings that we traditionally see on our landscape plans. There's an existing chain link fence along the backyards of both of the adjacent properties to the north and to the south. What the applicant proposes to do is to install a vinyl coated chain link fence along the entire perimeter of both properties, and that there would be some shrubbery adjacent to that fence as well. Now, the two existing driveways, on a recommendation from staff, would both be, the gravel would be taken up, and those would both be seeded and strawed, because the applicant has stated that neither of these two lots will be used for parking. There's ample parking to the rear of the rear of these two lots, and so there's no need for any parking to occur on this property. With that being said, if the board approves this request, staff recommends the following conditions. The subject development must receive administrative site plan approval from the planning and engineering staff. This is one that I can firmly say that does not require a planning commission approval, because the scope of activities on this particular site plan are very minor in nature. Basically, the playground equipment, and which is of a nature that I would imagine they probably purchased it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and the installation of a fence and some landscaping. Number two, all existing trees on site must be preserved, which they are committed to doing, as they've noted on their site plan. The two subject lots must be re-subdivided and combined with the larger main church lot to the east. And the reason for this is that there's a minimum lot size for institutional group assembly uses that go before the Board of Zoning Appeals in single-family residential zoning districts. Neither of these two lots on their own meet the requirements for the minimum lot size requirements, but if re-subdivided with the main church parcel, which is adjacent to it to the east, will meet that minimum lot size requirement. And number four, the two existing driveways should be removed and replaced with seed and straw. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Reverend Blakely is in the audience today, too, if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
Mr. Blomley, what about looks like the remnants of one of these houses still got some cinder blocks and some stuff laying around? Does that need to, is that something you thought about making a requirement of the approval, or is there any reason you left that out?
That's more of a codes issue, and code. I don't know if codes has an active file on these two properties as to whether or not and when they are required to clean that up. But certainly, I think that's a suitable condition that the properties be made safe and codes compliant within a certain time frame. And Mr. Blakely could address when they intend to have those lots cleaned up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Reverend Blakely, anything you'd like to add?
I did speak with our house moving contractor this morning. The work on the block and the remaining site work was supposed to have commenced Friday, and he was checking on that with me for me today. He's supposed to get back with me in the morning. Okay. So we'd like that done as quick as possible to get all that cleaned up. And as you can see, the one lot, the 1208, has already been removed, and then they filled in, and it'll be seed and strawed at the same time that we seed and straw the existing, what's left of the driveways. The only thing that we're going to try to maintain or to keep, what was the back porch of the one house was a pea gravel slab. If it will remain in a suitable fashion to use for tricycles or riding vehicles for our children, we're going to try to keep that. If it gets tore up in the midst of removing the block, we're going to go ahead and have it removed as well. But we're going to try to maintain that, what was the back porch of the one house on 1208.
Okay. So you're going to finish up this one just like you did the other one?
Yes.
I mean, basically. You just hadn't got there yet. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. This time, then, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would please come forward, state your name, your address, and any comments that you might have.
My name is Janie Smith, and I live at 507 West McKnight Drive. Also own the property at 509 West McKnight Drive. Apologize for my voice. It doesn't know what it wants to do today, so just bear with me. I do have some concerns about placing a playground at the Allen Street properties or Allen Avenue properties. My first concern is about the noise level. Children can't be expected to be quiet, especially on a playground, so they're going to be noisy. For example, West McKnight Drive dead ends on Gratland, and there's a row of houses then with large backyards, and then Mitchell Nilsson School as the crow flies. And we can, on certain days, we can hear the children from Mitchell Nilsson out on the playground, even though, we do have the buffer of houses and the large backyard. So this is even closer to our area, our residential area, or it is in our residential area, than the Mitchell Nilsson School. So the noise level does concern me very much. Not necessarily because the children are going to be noisy, but the fact that this is a working class neighborhood. And we can't assume that people are going to be going to work in the daytime and staying, sleeping at night when the children are not there. I know of 4 individuals who live kind of in the direct line of the playground who are in the medical profession. They work swing shifts. And before I retired, I worked at 10 at night to 6:30 in the morning. And believe me, you want to be able to sleep in the daytime so that you can function at night. And I'm concerned about these children and the time they're going to be there and the noise level. I'm also concerned about the depressed real estate market that we have, what negative impact it's going to have upon the real estate market. One of the houses you saw, the white one next door, is going to be auctioned off on December the 5th. And it belongs to a lady who is elderly and in the nursing home. And I'm sure she needs all the money she can get out of the property, to sustain her lifestyle at the nursing home. And, if there's a playground next door, what is that going to do to people who would be bidding on the property? Also, the house right across the side street from the White House is available for sale. It's up for sale. What is what impact is it going to have upon that sale of that house? Plus, The house across the street, not directly across, but kind of up a little bit across, has recently been purchased, and they're renovating it. So, is the playground going to have a negative impact upon that? So for those two reasons, the noise level and the possible impact it's going to have upon the sale of houses, I would like to request that you deny the permit. And if you cannot absolutely find it in your hearts to do so, I would like to request that more stringent conditions be placed on soundproofing the playground. For example, a chain link fence, I don't know how high they're proposing this chain link fence to be, but we do have chain link fences in our neighborhood, but we're also trying, and they're in the back area mostly, where houses are screening them, you can't see them directly from the streets. And this, if I understand it correctly, what he's talking about is putting a chain link fence directly on Allen Street. I don't know what height he's talking about to buffer the noise, but I would like to see you establish if you have to approve it, establish a setback, the maximum setback that you can allow from Allen Street and from the two properties on each side of the Allen properties that he's purchased. Also, I'd like to see a privacy fence, one that's taller than a normal chain link, installed there on the three sides of the property, so it will not be interfering with the neighbors or the noise coming out toward Allen Street, and shrubbery placed around that privacy fence. And I would prefer that the privacy fence not be chain link, that it be ornamental iron or the wood privacy or something like that, to buffer the noise from the neighborhood, because we do have people who are trying to sleep while those children are going to be playing. So I would prefer that you deny the request. If you can't find it in your hearts to do so, I would like to see more stringent conditions be placed upon the building of the playground and surrounding it, so that it's not visible from Allen and that the noise is not coming onto Allen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any questions for Ms. Smith? Have you talked to Mr. Reverend Blakely or anyone
No, I haven't.
about the church about your concerns?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Matthew, can you show us on the overhead where her house is? I think she said she owns 2 lots.
I'm at West McKnight. No, I'm up towards Grantland. Where's Grantland? Yeah, right here. Over here. Okay.
Okay, Chairman Rogers, she pushed that a little bit that way. She told me that she owns this lot that's right here on the corner of Grantland and West McKnight, and this lot here that is adjacent to that lot. So these 2 lots here, and the 2 subject properties are these 2 lots here. This is Allen, this is Grantland here. So she lives in the block of West McKnight that's in between Allen and Grantland.
Which one is her actual house or her residence?
3A.
3A, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else present wishing to speak for or against this application? All right, if not, then we'll go ahead and declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussions or a motion. I know, Reverend Blakely, I'm going to call on you to kind of address some of those concerns that she might have. You all apparently haven't talked about this before now, so just curious as to what your thoughts are hearing those comments.
A couple of comments I can make about the noise. While Mitchell Nielsen is grade school, the primary use for this playground is preschool, ages 5 and under, and the amount of time that they're on the playground at any one time is an hour at a time or less. And as Mr. Blumley stated before, what those operation hours are, Tuesdays and Thursdays, our Mother's Day Out operations is 9 to 2. There's not someone on the playground that entire time. They use that about an hour a day, Tuesdays and Thursdays during the school year. The other times are Wednesday nights, weather permitting, and not every Wednesday night do we use the playground for our preschool. And then sometimes on Sunday mornings, our worship goes from 8 o'clock until about 12:30. Maybe 30 minutes during that time there would be someone, again, preschool age. As you saw the equipment, it is not designed for grade school age playground. It's designed for a preschool age playground. And so the amount of time that there's actually someone on the playground is not that extensive. The property values, to me personally, I think we've raised the value of what was there. We had 2 houses that were vacant 2 years and 3 years that were not in the greatest of shape. Rather than us utilizing the houses for housing was not in the long-term goal for us. It was an improvement on the property to us to remove the houses and turn this into a park setting to help the overall look of our neighborhood, because we are neighborhood owners as well as she is. And so that was my goal, and that's one of the reasons I had no problem with Mr. Blumley coming back and requesting that we keep all the trees. That was always our goal, to keep all the existing trees. My only concern about a 6-foot privacy fence is security during the hours when there's not someone on the property. And because, yes, you can't see in, you can't see in. And visual control of the property as officers patrol the area, or just being able to see into the property would be a concern of mine. But as far as landscaping and things around the chain link, my understanding would be a 4-foot vinyl coated chain link fence is what's required by code. And then the landscaping around those 3 sides that are either on the Allen Avenue side or adjacent to the properties on either side. I'm flexible on how close to Allen Avenue. Part of our reasoning was that asking us to put the fence out so there'd be no parking area on the Allen Avenue side, and then for us to utilize as much green space, usable green space. But that's more than negotiable about how close or how far away from Allen Avenue that we'd like that side of the fence to be.
And to kind of supplement what Mr. Blakely said, with regards to the chain link fence, it was not staff's. I believe Mr. Blakely was going to have a chain link fence to begin with, but it was not staff's intention that the chain link fence serve as a buffer or a screen. I think that they wanted a chain link fence more for the safety of the children as opposed to a screen. And we as staff didn't feel as if it was necessary to recommend the privacy fence around the entire perimeter of the property for the reasons that Mr. Blakely stated, but also the fact that it would aesthetically, we were concerned a little bit about how a 6-foot privacy fence would look around the entire border of the property and how that would mesh with the neighborhood, just having an enclosed area in a 6-foot wood privacy fence. So that was one of the reasons why we opted against recommending that and trying to keep the properties as natural looking as possible.
On average, how many children are we talking about?
In stating the 10 to 20, 20 would be maximum. Our class size in our weekday Mother's Day Out program is 10 to 12. They're on a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning, there may be 15 or more, but really 15 is probably the max that we'd be looking at any one time. Other than, and I will add one week in June we have Vacation Bible School. It probably gets used more during that 1 week as far as a continuous time than any other time of the year. But that, as I said, that's usually the first week of June, and we run from 9 o'clock to noon during those 5 days.
How long have you had this equipment on the property then?
Right at a year. Those two playground, the one set of playground equipment was our existing playground equipment. It's institutional grade equipment. The other equipment, those two projects were Eagle Scout projects that two of our church members did for us, relocating the one playground. And then the second playground you saw is a musical playground, which all the items in that are musically oriented. That one's been there not quite a year yet. It'll be a year this coming spring.
Have you had any issue with neighborhood kids, or has there been any, the kids aggregate here, or other than, I know what your uses are right now, it's not restricted. Even if you had a chain link, it would still be accessible. I'm just wondering if
right. There's on occasion that there will be neighborhood families that have used the playground, and we're more than open to that. That's not, and as far as I'm concerned, it would continue to be open to that, and unless it became an issue where damage or vandalism was an issue, but that hasn't been at this point. I would love, and even the additional green space, the green grass space that will be created by this, for us is open to the community. It's not anything we plan on locking gates of the fence, but those that want to come and use it are more than welcome to use it. But as far as we haven't had a problem with inappropriate age children using that age group.
Kids congregating there or anything like that.
But no, we have not had that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Is it okay if I make 2 comments as a result of what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm not proposing that the entire playground be enclosed by the fence. 3 sides open to his parking lot, so that it's not going to, in other words, it would be on the 2 sides next to the houses and on Allen, not enclosing his parking lot, so he can easily see inside. And the reason we haven't had any problems with noise for the last year with the playground equipment over there, the 2 houses have been sitting there. They have just been removed within the last, 2 weeks? Month. The 2 houses have just been moved. So the playground equipment was behind those 2 houses. It couldn't be seen by the neighborhood children, so we haven't had the noises because we've had the buffer, and the children have been congregating there because they couldn't see the playground. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll go in and make a motion that we approve the application with the comments from our staff being met.
I'll second.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Reverend Blakely, that application has been granted. Appreciate you coming in today. Ms. Smith, we appreciate you coming in today, too. Appreciate your comments. Don't want you to think that they went unheard. I can say from my standpoint, I feel confident that the church will be a good neighbor to those people in the Allen Avenue area. So I think it'll be a nice addition to the neighborhood, really.
We'll let you know.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. All right. Move on now to our final application is sign variance request, application S09067 by Mr. Buddy Follis of Sign Masters Company for the Agnotri Group, requesting a variance from section 25 1/4, 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro signed ordinance, and this prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 2933 Medical Center Parkway. Ms. Kerr, you review that one for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The applicant, Pradeep Agnatori, is requesting permission to erect one internally illuminated freestanding wall sign with 40 square feet opaque background display area and an overall height of 8 feet. The sign will be located in a 40-foot sanitary sewer easement and a 30-foot consolidated utility easement, water easement. The agreement for a sign in a city easement has been signed by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, the Director of Building and Codes, as well as a letter of approval from the CUD project coordinator. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and requirements. And we ask that due to the sensitivity of the placement of this sign in regards to the water lines, that the sign be located on-site by a Tennessee registered engineer or surveyor, and that a form of certification of sign placement to be provided prior to permitting.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? Going to get off easy. At this time, and there being no questions, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussions or motion.
Chairman Rogers, I make a motion that we approve the sign variance request subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Mr. Follis, that application has been granted. Appreciate you coming in. Okay, staff reports and other business.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, too. All right. All right, well, there being no other business, then we are adjourned. Thank you.